Yeah, g'day YouTubers. Tinker O'Toole again here with another video. Today we're going to talk about the top plate cutting angle and the side plate angle. Now your side plate angle comes from your top plate cutting angle, if that makes sense. So what we will do, we'll put a slide up there. They say a picture speaks 1,000 words, so we'll put a slide up there, and as you can see, the top left-hand picture says top plate cutting angle, and you'll see it states 60 degrees. Then you've got top plate filing angle, because this is a compounded beveled angle, so when you look at the top plate filing angle, it's between 25 and 35 degrees, but the cutting edge is the top plate cutting angle. So yeah, a dual angle, you've got two angles there. And the third angle, which is the one on the bottom, is side plate angle, and it says 60 to 90 degrees. And I remember looking at these drawings, and this is going back many years ago, and I'm looking at it, I'm going, well, it looks like one drawing I'm looking from the inside of the cutter, and the other drawing I'm looking on the outside of the cutter, which is actually correct. But why does it say 60 degrees on the top plate cutting angle, yet the side plate shows 60 to 90 degrees? I thought, well, that's odd. If you've got 60 degrees on the top plate cutting angle, should you not have a side plate exactly the same? It couldn't make sense to me, because if I run the file through, surely it's the same. If the top plate angle is 60, the side plate angle should be 62. So for me, that was very confusing for a number of years, and I really just sort of forgot about the side plate angle. And when I started to really get into chainsaws, angles and everything else, and it took a while for everything to really make sense, because you had diagrams that would just sort of say, hey, this is this angle, that's that angle, but there's no explanation. So that's what I'm here to sort of, especially for the beginners, is to tell you what is the difference between the top plate cutting angle and the side plate angle. Well, first of all, if you have a close look at the grinder, right, we'll leave that picture up while we can. When we set this movable head, this is referred to the top plate cutting angle, because what it actually does, the grinding wheel comes down onto that beveled angle, which is this angle here, this beveled angle at the front, right? It creates a different angle. So that angle is adjustable on this grinder and on many other grinders. On the real cheap grinders, it's non-adjustable, it's fixed, and it's fixed at 60 degrees. 9 times out of 10, you're going to have 60 degrees. When we actually set the top plate angle, we're setting that at 50 degrees. So we set it 50 degrees, but we end up with 60 degrees on the side plate, or 75 degrees in the case of semi-chisel. So how is it, if we set it 60 degrees or 50 degrees, that we end up with a different figure for full chisel and semi-chisel? Well, what you've got to realise, and this can happen with a file as well, if you're using a file, and going back over 34 years ago, they told you to put the file in the tooth and hold it about the top of the file about 10% higher. When you actually do that, the top plate cutting angle is created, and it's got a degree figure on it, which is roughly about 60 degrees. But because of that curvature, there's a little curvature on the file, we can end up with a slightly different angle on the side plate. Or if we're using a grinding wheel and we're using the rounded section of the grinding wheel, we could end up with a slightly different angle. Even on Stihl's Hexa, it states that we're going to use a 65 degree angle, yet on the Stihl USG chart it says that the side plate is 60. And I've actually checked it, and that's pretty spot on. So now to check the side plate angle, you need one of these Stihl gauges. Okay, with this type of gauge from Stihl, you have a look, it's got all these windows in here. This is for the top plate, 30 degrees left and right, 10 degrees left and right, 35 degrees left and right. And you tilt it to the side and you place this on top of the chain with the tooth facing that way, right? Then you read the side of the plate. You've got 80 degrees in that little window there, 90 degrees, 60 degrees, 75 and 85 on the edge. And you line that up with the top of the tooth and you'll get your reading. And what you're actually measuring, if you have a look at where that blue texture is, that's the thickness of the top plate. All right? So that's what we're measuring, that little pointy corner. Now, when you do that on semi-chisel, we don't have a pointy corner, so we generally start to measure just below where the curve is, where it starts to go straight, right about there where my fingernail is. So we're measuring about, in this section here, we're on full chisel, we're measuring from on the full chisel, we're measuring right up from the very top of the point to there, whereas on the semi-chisel, we're not measuring the curve because it's too hard to measure the curve, so we're measuring about here, in this point here, right at that point, that transition. And we're looking, generally speaking, if the top plate cutting angle is 60 degrees, the side plate on a semi-chisel will be about 75 degrees because of that transition of the curve. Okay, so the side plate exists because you created a top plate cutting angle either with a grinder or when you did that with a file. And if you hold your file down too low in the tooth, then it will change the top plate cutting angle. Now, a lot of the new chains that are out on the market, Hexa is one. Stihl's RS has been on the market for a long time. But if you look at a Stihl's RS profile on the side, and we'll just pop that up, that'll be Stihl's RS, you'll notice if you look at the entire side plate that it's not a traditional C-type shape. It's got a little tiny point on it, and then it comes down almost straight. It's about 85 degrees in that midsection of the side plate. But when we do look at the Stihl's RS, you'll notice that that little point there is approximately 60 degrees. And it'll look a little bit like this. Right, so if this is a grinding wheel, what we will do is put a slide up first, right? So that slide that we're looking at the moment is the inside view of Stihl's RS chain. And what you will notice is that there's three angles there. Now, I've shown the grinding wheel with a blue line, and you'll see where the white writing says grinding wheel. And you'll notice that if you have a close look, you'll see that the side of the wheel just touches this top plate. That's all it needs to do. It needs to grind the top plate only. Then it transitions to the second angle, which is about 85 degrees. And that goes all the way down the side plate. And then you'll notice there's a little curve on the bottom. So you've got three angles there. And essentially, if you look at that blue line is your grinding wheel. That's the shape of the grinding wheel. Now, if you were to look at Hexa, I've got a bit of cardboard here, and we'll just zoom back out. And when we look at that, you can see the side of the wheel, like that. This is the other angle that's going down on the side plate, and this is the bottom of the tooth. So when you get the file, this part on the bottom doesn't file, it's just flat. It's these two parts here that actually grind any metal away and creates the Hexa type shape. So you need to sharpen your grinding wheel, not sharpen I should say, you need to profile your grinding wheel so it's got a 120 degree angle like that. So from there 60 degrees and then another 60 degrees. So that's what it looks like. Normal grinding wheel profile will look like that, half a circle. So that's pretty standard. And you're going to get a simple type shape that looks like that. Now, by having all these different shapes on the wheel, is that it can affect the side plate. It depends on whether the side of the grinding wheel, right? So the curve of the wheel finishes about here. Same as if you look at the card, right? You got the straight section here. And the straight section finishes and the curve starts there. So when we tilt the grinding wheel at that angle, top plate cutting angle, when it touches the tooth, it depends whether this top section, this flat section, is touching the tip of the point or whether the curve is touching. And this is where, if the curve is touching, this is where the side plate angle will be affected, because a straight section on the side of the wheel will give almost, if you set your grinder, all right, if you set your grinder to 60 degrees, top plate cutting angle, and then you've got that curve on there, if a little bit of that curve touches the tooth in the upper region where the side plate is, you're going to have a slightly different angle. And if you were to look at the Stihl USG chart, right, or you were to look at a Husqvarna chart or an Oregon or a Carlton, and we look over at 3/8, we'll just zoom in there. So if we look over at 932, 3/8, it's got 40 degrees there, don't worry about that. But we go over to the, right over to the other side, over here, and you'll see RS, Rapid Super, 60 degrees, and Rapid Micro, 75 degrees, which is, Rapid Micro is semi-chisel. And as I was saying before, on a semi-chisel tooth, we are measuring the side plate up the, not right at the very point, where just below, where the curve ends there, we're starting to measure right at that point there. Whereas on a full chisel, we're measuring right up that top of that point. I hope that makes sense. So this face here, this doesn't have a curve on it. So we're measuring from there to there. So this top plate angle here has a side plate of approximately, on RS chain, 60 degrees, which is 10 degrees different, because on Stihl's RS we use 50 degrees for the top plate cutting angle, not 60, we use 50. A little bit more aggressive. Stihl are always aggressive in their angles. So I hope that makes sense. Now the other thing is, and maybe I can demonstrate that with, hopefully you can see, and I've checked Stihl's RS and I've checked Stihl's RM chain, the semi-chisel, and it does line up with 75 degrees on the side plate, and Stihl's RS does line up to 60 degrees. Okay, so what we've got here is the Stihl gauge, and we're going to check the side plate of Stihl's Hexa. And it's listed in the USG chart as being 60 degrees. And if you have a look, it's pretty spot on. So if you have a look how we line that up, that lines up pretty bloody spot on. Right? Look at that. That spot on. Because if that was out a couple of degrees, you'd notice that. Okay, so what we've got here is Stihl's RM chain, rapid micro. So we're measuring right about in this spot here. You can see that 75 degrees. Now, if I put 60, you can see that 60 doesn't line up very good, where 75 degrees lines up really well. So you're looking at that little bit of a straight section, if you can see it. I think you can see that lines up with 75 pretty good, whereas 60 degrees it doesn't. I've got a light at the back. I'm just wondering whether, if I can just adjust the light, whether you can see that a little bit. No, it's not. I think that's probably about the best that you're going to see that. Just try one more time. You see, it just doesn't line up with 60 degrees. So remember what we're looking at, where we're actually measuring, for those that may be getting confused. I'll just turn that back a little bit. We're measuring right about there, that transition there. So you've got the curve on here, so we're measuring right about here. You can see where the side plate is there. That's roughly where we're measuring. So you can see that reflection a little bit right on that curvature there. That reflection right there. Right? Where the radius comes down and meets it there. So we're measuring right at that point. I'll just do that one more time. And I think you'll agree that that's 75 degrees, give or take. Now, end conclusion. The end conclusion is that the side plate is created, the side plate angle is created from the top plate cutting angle. The top plate cutting angle can be created by two things: a file, which you don't have a lot of control of because it's circular, but generally speaking, a top plate cutting angle on a file depends where it's held, whether it's held 20% or 25%. People will hold the file in different positions from brand new to end of life, and they could end up all over the place. So your side plate angle could end up all over the place as well. But if you've got a grinder, and let's just say we stick with 60 degrees in most cases on semi-chisel and full chisel, you will find out on a 3/8 chain, as we mentioned before, that RS chain, which is rapid super, will have a side plate angle of 60 degrees, and RM chain will have a side plate angle of 75 degrees, which is semi-chisel rapid micro. We'll just put another slide up again of the same illustration that shows in the left. So we'll put that up now. And hopefully that's starting to make a bit of sense when you look at the left icon, top plate cutting angle, 60 degrees. We're not interested in the top plate filing angle, and the side plate angle. So it could be anywhere. It could vary from that 60 degrees, 65, 70, 75. It can change, and it depends on the radius of the wheel. It depends on also whether we're grinding on the side of the wheel or we're grinding on the curve of the wheel. If we're grinding on the side of the wheel, the side plate angle won't be too much difference in the top plate cutting angle. But if we're putting a curve on that tooth, in other words, we're using the curvature of the wheel, the side plate will be different than the top plate cutting angle. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, all right, let's just say, for argument's sake, what is the difference between the side plate cutting angle if it's a little bit different. How much difference does that make? Well, look, I guess you're only talking a couple of percent at best between more durability and being a little bit sharper. It's not a lot. But hey, here's the thing. You either grind your chains or file your chains to 100% maximum cutting efficiency, or you don't. So generally, if I've got the option of making the chain to be as sharp as possible and to be as durable as possible, then I will chase those angles and do the job properly so that my chains are as sharp as possible and will last as long between sharpenings, which means that when I'm out in the field and I'm cutting wood, there's a big difference between how I sharpen chains and someone that sharpens them poorly that doesn't get good results. I've seen it many times out in the field where the person next to me is taking twice as long as what I am in cutting because their chains aren't sharp enough and they don't have the knowledge on how to give the best angle and durability. And that's what it's all about. The correct angle and making sure that the chain is sharp as possible with the right angles so it's durable and lasts a lot longer. There's a big difference between a chain that's sharpened properly and a chain that's sharpened very poorly because the operator doesn't have the experience or the knowledge on how to do that. I hope this information helps because I remember when I first started, I was a little bit confused between top plate cutting angle and side plate angle. When I looked at the drawing, they looked like the same, except one side it looked like I was looking on the inside of the tooth and the other one was looking on the outside of the tooth. No explanation was really even given to me, and even if you do a literature search, you won't find a lot of information about it. But just remember, it's the curvature of the file or the curvature of the grinding wheel that can make the top plate cutting angle different than the side plate angle. So just remember that, and usually they're not too far away from each other, but in the case of semi-chisel, yes, it's 15 degrees difference. So yeah, and that's correct because we've just measured it and you've seen it there. So thanks for watching. Bye for now.